Everyone in HR should be focused on understanding the business, knowing the competitive landscape. Why is our product relevant? Who are our competitors? What are the challenges and opportunities externally? And what does that mean internally? And then finding talent solutions that help to solve those problems. And that is how I look at HR. I don't always think that everyone looks at HR that way. I think sometimes we still get what I like to call personnel 1965, policy police, HR is here. But the leaders that understood that and truly engaged myself or other HR business partners or HR colleagues as true partners to solve a business solution.
Welcome to I'm Telling HR, the go-to podcast for ambitious HR professionals who want to shake up the status quo, make a real impact, and fast-track their careers. Brought to you by Rippling. I'm your host, Leighton Martin, and I'm an HR business partner here at Rippling. Today, we're talking change management, the kind that actually works. In this episode, you'll learn how to plan for change before it happens, how to build trust through detailed communication, how to position HR as a true business driver, and so much more. We're joined today by Courtney Panik, Chief People Officer at Symphony. Courtney has 20 years of HR experience. She's an expert in change management with numerous M&A deals, global programs, and large-scale reorganizations under her belt. So let's kick things off with something Courtney wishes someone had warned her about when she was leading her first change initiative.
There's so much time spent in the preparation that people underestimate. You spend most of the time in the preparation. There's a huge chunk of time in the follow through, and the actual tactical change is like so quick. But all of the focus is placed on that organization announcement or the hire, or maybe we're opening an office or closing an office. But that really, when you look at the end to end, is such a small piece of the work that has to get done. And once it's announced, it's really just executing. But the thought, the strategy, and bringing in your stakeholders and the planning is such a huge piece of it. Whatever we're doing, whether it's a change management or simply just running a program, that the planning is such a huge piece of that, and it sets the rest of the initiative up for success.
Even with the best planning, things can still slip through. Courtney shares the most common blind spots, even for seasoned HR pros.
We are a function that should always be anticipating the needs of the business and our employees, which means we need to be 10, 20 plus steps ahead. And if you're playing that far ahead, then you really should never be in a high pressure situation, because you're planning and understanding what is happening. So it's that planning piece around when you see something coming, you see something changing. So change management and some of these big change management initiatives, acquisitions, organizational changes, leadership changes, they don't happen overnight. Like, people don't wake up on a Monday and be like, we're changing the org on a Wednesday. I know employees don't realize this, but I think a lot of maybe even HR professionals don't realize these things are thought of sometimes years in advance, and they may be conceptual. And then as you get closer and closer and things evolve, it starts to crystallize. And as you're having these discussions at the leadership level, you're talking more and more about, and they get more defined as you get closer to it. So it really should be no surprise if someone wants to consolidate a team or open an office somewhere. And if it is, then that's a whole different conversation. So my point on the blind spot is HR should always be anticipating, and these conversations are happening well in advance to when they actually have to happen. So we have plenty of time to plan and to be proactive and thoughtful in our planning. And if you do that, then you don't necessarily feel the pressure. And I think that that's also really important in how we engage with not only our stakeholders, but employees. So change brings ambiguity. Most people do not like change. I'm the opposite. I run towards it, but most people are not like me. So people look to leadership and to HR when things are ambiguous, or when there's change happening around them. They're looking to trust us that it's going to be okay. So what is our demeanor like? Are we showing up calm? It's kind of like when you're on a flight and you have turbulence and you look at the flight attendant. So if HR is feeling pressure and we're having fire drills going through change management, that is not going to instill trust in our partners or in our employees. So we can't let that happen. We've got to be ahead of it. We've got to be anticipating and planning. So I think that is the biggest blind spot. And I said it at the beginning, but we tend to shortchange the importance of a thoughtful plan and the work that you have to put in up front and the level of detail. But in the end, if you want it adopted and you want things to land as intended, that work up front is well worth it.
Planning is one thing, but executing change takes strong relationships. Next, Courtney shares how to build and leverage internal partnerships across teams like communications, PR, legal, and beyond, and why those collaborations are the key to getting it right.
If I think about who I work with pretty much all day long outside of my team, it's the communications team, finance, business operations, and legal. And if I think about the relationships I've carried over and the people that I've remained close to from past companies, those people worked in those specific functions. So when you're in it together, when you're in the trenches together, you're in it. So building relationships with, legal and finance and business operations and communications, they're really important because you're never doing anything alone and everything is interconnected. One of the things is obviously you want to build trust, like the foundation of everything. But I think it's with any relationship, you want to understand where that person or that team or function is coming from. What are their challenges? What is the partnership currently like? And what could each side do better or differently to make it stronger? What you collaborate on to maybe operate differently and have better outcomes? And then seek their input. One of the things that as I've gotten further in my career that really has gotten under my skin is when I'm surprised by something at work. I don't like to micromanage, but I do not like to be surprised if something is going on and I don't know and then I get asked by somebody. And I know I don't like that. So I would imagine the legal team wouldn't like it if we decided to change a policy, or the finance team wouldn't like it if we decided to spend $2 million in spot bonuses all of a sudden. So it is bringing them in for their input, keeping them informed, and that level of transparency in working together. And I think when you look at change management or sort of any project and just operating in business in general, you get a more comprehensive and cohesive outcome the more players you have at the table, the more perspectives. So those relationships internally are so important to really get to the best solution that you can with those partners.
All companies want to build a cult of transparency, but what does that actually look like when the future is uncertain? Courtney breaks down how to communicate with clarity, even when you don't have all the answers.
This is really hard. This is where that trust comes in, and the planning and stakeholder management. I think those are like really the foundations around it. So initially, if it's something big like an organizational change or some sort of reorganization or something that impacts people, places, maybe our product, initially is always just keep it really tight. So sometimes it's just the executive team. And I will even put on overview decks or whatever documents we're using to track the project, I'll put a ITK in the know, and I will list the people who know about the project. So it is very clear to everyone who knows and who does not know. And then when it's appropriate and as the project starts to grow and it makes sense to start to bring in other people, maybe some direct reports, maybe you need to pull the payroll team in, or the GC needs to bring in more of the legal team to look at things. We agree on those, and then they're brought in very thoughtfully, and you just kind of continue to do that. And we talked about this before. The whole point of that is you want to make sure the outcome that you're intending actually comes to fruition, and that the message isn't lost through the grapevine or isn't misconstrued. And sometimes if someone hears a piece of data or a piece of information, but not the whole story, I always find that in the absence of information, people make things up. The rumor mill, highly entertaining, incredibly frustrating, and sometimes detrimental, very damaging. You never want people to find out that way. And so managing those communications, that all builds on how you've worked together and the trust that you've brought in with that inner team on, like, this is what we're doing, this is the plan, this is the timeline, everyone's aligned, this is now who knows. And so you can really kind of control that and control the message. I always feel like when I say the words control the message, it sounds very like negative, but it really is to make sure that when you're going through change, that people understand why you're doing it and what is the impact, and then what you need them to do, if anything. And that's just really clear to them. And you could give them as much information as possible. But if things get spiraled out of control and you don't keep that group tight up front, you really do lose control of that message. Because in the end, and we're all human, we all have mortgages and obligations outside of our roles. If something big is happening at work, I think in general, we will go to, what does this mean to me? Am I going to be able to make my mortgage? Am I going to be able to make the car payment? Am I going to lose my job? Am I getting a promotion? Am I getting a new manager? Like, people will just naturally think about what it means to, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as long as you know that, then you can prepare for making sure that they have the information that they need to feel comforted or to make the decisions that they need to make that makes the most sense for themselves.
HR is full of long-standing best practices, but Courtney offers a mindset shift that challenges the old playbook and redefines what strategic HR should look like today.
This is as much for HR employees as it is for managers and leaders who may not think this way. The HR function can be a strategic partner that enables the business to achieve its goals. And in order to do that, everyone in HR should be focused on understanding the business, knowing the competitive landscape. Why is our product relevant? Who are our competitors? What are the challenges and opportunities externally? And what does that mean internally? And then finding talent solutions that help to solve those problems. And that is how I look at HR. I don't always think that everyone looks at HR that way. I think sometimes we still get what I like to call personnel 1965, policy police, HR is here. But the leaders that understood that and truly engaged myself or other HR business partners or HR colleagues as true partners to solve a business solution were performing head and shoulders above those who just kind of kept it as a distant, I'll call you when I need you. And as an HR team, we have to earn that trust with our customers, with the employees, with the managers, with the leaders. And that goes back to planning, being prepared, anticipating needs, knowing the business, using data.
Before any change is announced, the real work has already started. But what exactly should that pre-work look like? Courtney breaks down the must-have steps every HR leader should take before anything goes public.
So number one, identify your stakeholders up front and proactively bring them in and constantly manage them. I think it's so important. HR is not leading the change on their own. It is the leadership team, and sometimes even further down, it's management. And sometimes it's the employees that are leading the change. So we're there to consult, we're there to support, to help, to be subject matter experts, provide tools and coaching, but understanding who your stakeholders are, who your audience is, bring those stakeholders and partners, cross-functional partners in as soon as you possibly can and work with them throughout. My thing is to have a project plan, to have a detailed project plan and to put the time up front into establishing that project plan. And if it's, 100 line items or 200 line items, and it's, again, the planning goes into it. And the reason why is that becomes the foundation for ensuring everything that needs to get done. You start to realize things that are missing when you start to put timing against tasks and you start to see dependencies and gaps. It becomes the foundation of that cross-functional stakeholder team that you bring together up front, because you're decking owners against it and you're bringing them in to own the change management project or whatever is happening, and it holds people accountable. That is, for me, like the little trick in the bag, to always have my project plan and to dust something off. As you're going through that, I think it helps you think through, what are the risks? What are the dependencies? What are the gaps? What seems like I don't know what to put on this project plan, maybe it's 10 things before you know it. It's, well, unfortunately, in this situation, we're going to have to impact people's roles. Well, what does that look like? Oh, there's people on immigration. We need to think about that. That becomes another 10 line items. And the devil gets really into the details. What you want at the end is to get adoption. And you want that change to go through, and you want your employee base to adopt it. They're not going to adopt something that they don't feel trust and faith in, that it wasn't thought through. And so even though it's tactical, and I don't love playing in the tactical world, I do find a project plan to be really important.
So what goes into those line items? Courtney walks us through how to break down a plan strategically and tactically.
So every project is a bit different. I think a good place to start is to think about what functions are involved. Teams are involved, right? So if you look at HR and just break down the teams within HR, talent acquisition and HR operations and HR business partners, et cetera, compensation, rewards. And then you could also do that for your external partners. And then if there's any main deliverables like a communications plan or content that needs to be created. So what are the big functions that are associated with the project or the key stakeholders? And what would be the actions that those teams would have to deliver as it relates to the project? There's plenty of examples of project plans on the internet. A basic one is you would have that work stream or that function identified. You'd have the task, the line item task associated with it. Who's the owner? One name. Cannot point fingers. It's got to be the one person. They can work with other people to get it done, but their name is on the line to deliver it. The start and stop. So when they should start the work on it and when it's due, both important. So it's not just the due date because you have to sort of plan for, there's that planning again. Things could take a couple weeks or a couple months to execute. And so you need a start and a stop. Also the status. So is it not started? Is it on track? Is it off track? At risk? Or is it completed? We love the completes. I always put the completed drop down in company colors. That's a little celebration. So we've got our Symphony blue. Once it hits blue, we know we got it done and dusted and we move on to the next. Any dependencies. So we cannot do line item 37 because it relates to line item 25. And one may be like legal has to review the contract before we send the contract. So you want to identify those dependencies. And of course, notes. Just a reminder of what was decided or what wasn't. I always capture decisions made in there. They are very detailed. To put one of these together, it is a lot of work up front, but it is worth it if you're thinking about the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And then as part of that and having a detailed communications plan, so one of those key stakeholders up front is always the communications team and or PR team, however teams are organized, but internal and then potentially external. And then having a communications plan down to when you're telling, what is that flow? Who is writing the message? Who's delivering the message? How is that going to be? I've been on projects a couple of times in various companies where the comms plan has gone down almost to the minute. You never want someone who is individually impacted to find out information through the grapevine, through a firm-wide message. So you have to start at the center and then work out. And then when you start to look at it that way and you look at that employee experience or that stakeholder experience, then you start to see all the intricacies into the potential minute-by-minute comms plan.
We've covered pre-work, project plans, and the mindset behind effective change. But if Courtney had to sum it all up in one bumper sticker for every HR leader, here's what it would say.
I would say the bumper sticker would say, how is more impactful than what? How you do your job, how you communicate, how you engage is more impactful than the actual task that you're trying to execute.
Thanks for tuning in to I'm Telling HR, brought to you by Rippling. I'm your host, Leighton Martin. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to click the link in the show notes to subscribe to the I'm Telling HR newsletter, where thousands of forward-thinking HR professionals are learning to lead with impact and level up their careers. We'll see you next time.